Hey everyone, welcome back to the realm. I'm laughing because Rich is making duck kiss faces. I'm Gina,
I'm Rich as usual.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Brian.
and we welcome you back. We are closing out this season, which thanks for everybody's patience. The train slightly derailed, and you guys stuck in there with me. We're back on track. We're going to get these last couple episodes out to close up this season, and then we are going to come back in October with some pretty amazing stuff. So, very excited about what we got coming up on deck, but we've been looking forward to this episode all season. I think Brian, more than anybody, was like prepared for this moment for tonight. So I'm really excited to kind of get to his part. So we're going to split this episode up into a couple parts. So there'll be part 1, part 2, maybe part 3. And we're each going to kind of chime in on it. So I'm going to start with kind of the history of UFOs. Kind of when did this nonsense all start, as they call it? I don't think it's nonsense, spoiler alert. But so let's just dig right in. What I can say is that I got lost over the last few weeks down so many different peaks and valleys and little alleys and rabbit holes, as you will. Like I mean, I got lost in some of this, and I have come up with so many things that now, like, oh my gosh, we have to do an episode on this and that. So I really unearthed some things that I actually didn't even know about myself. So I'll be excited to see if you guys knew about it. So UFOs, unidentified flying objects. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of TV shows, movies, books, articles, conspiracy theories, podcasts, TV, you name it. It's been talked about. And it's been talked about a lot. And it's been talked about with a lot of the same information, which I don't think that these episodes are going to be any different as far as that goes, but I think our take on it, and I think that people will learn some things that I learned, because I had no idea. So I'm sure that there's other people out there that will learn some stuff from us. So as it stands, when I had to take a look at this from a perspective of United States and the rest of the world, because it seems to me that what we've really uncovered is that the United States has a disproportionate amount more of, yes, go ahead.
Have you seen that meme going around where it says what the aliens see when they get ready to attack, and it's just North America? It's like it only happens here, you know.
No, but that's so funny, because that's what I was thinking. I was like, holy shit, like I feel like that we have a disproportionate amount of things happening here with regards to like UFO sightings, even paranormal, although I have to say there's a lot of ancient and paranormal things buried in many other countries and cultures, right? So we don't own the market on it. I think it's talked about a lot more here, and I think there's a lot more conspiracy theories here in this country more than anywhere that I've found. So that's very funny, because it's pretty much true. Having said that, though, we know it as unidentified flying objects. They now have the new term UAPs, which is unidentified aerial phenomena. So
see, it's different, everybody. It's something totally different now.
We had to completely rename it.
So,
but what we can take a look at is when we're looking back at people actually reporting having seen UFOs, we can go all the way back. I mean, there was a newspaper article, which this is one of the things I'm going to bring up, a lot of topics that we're going to have to talk about on other episodes for sure, because we just can't possibly cover this all. But even back in the 1700s, with the first settlers here, there was a print, a press. What was it called? There was a newspaper, and I have to think about it. It was like the Gentleman's. It was a newspaper, and gosh, I can't remember. I wish I could find it now. But it was like the Gentleman's Press or something like that. And of course, it's named that because women weren't allowed to read back then. But in this like magazine, essentially it was like something that was printed out on the printing presses, went out to all the men, and it talked about these unidentified lights in the sky. And it took place over on the East Coast, just where early settlers had come in. So we have like articles that date back that far. But when we take a look at most of the articles and most of the things that were printed, we're talking about from the 1940s, like reporting on sightings from the 1940s on into now today. We do have those anomalies of others, I'm sure there's other newspapers out there that we don't even know of, archived somewhere, deep in some library and in a small town where maybe there were things that were reported. But for our purposes, generally speaking, 1940s till now is when we saw a lot of this happen. And they said it was after the World War II era, actually, that things really started to bustle with regards to people reporting it or being more open to talking about it and looking into it. Yes, Rich.
Could that be because you had more aircraft in the sky, like fighter pilots? Maybe there was more of a presence where people were seeing more of that. I wonder if that's why you see more of that reported after the wars and stuff.
Yeah, I honestly I couldn't correlate the two, but what was interesting when we talk about military was how the military then became involved in this whole like UFO reporting. So, UFOs, we've heard of people reporting multiple different types of shapes in the sky, right? So over time, that's the one thing that's been constant is kind of like we have the cigar shape, we have the triangular shape, and then we have like the traditional saucer. Now you have the occasional like cubes, which if it's Borg, I would be so excited. But
don't be excited about Borg.
That means that it exists. I don't. Okay, but 7 of 9 was like she was awesome. So she was a good Borg. Like maybe all the Borg could become better. But for
7 of 9 or the friendly one that they run into on TNG the one time. Resistance is futile. You're employing with forces you don't understand, Gina.
Yes, Rich.
Now, what's interesting is that the orb shape and the fireball are two of the more popular ones as well when you research it and look. But I think those are also ones that you could say a fireball could be meteor, could be something else in the atmosphere or in space causing your fireball. I think that one you could argue, and maybe the orb type you can argue could be just reflective light, could be something like that. I think it's interesting that when I see that those are two of the more popular ones.
Yep.
Then, as opposed to like the cigar or even the flying disc, that's interesting to me that those other two are ones you can almost come up with other ideas to say, well, it could be this, it could be that.
Yeah, because I think even now, more modern day, we've seen quite a bit of people reporting like these glowing orbs in the sky with like sparkling kind of lights. We've talked about it before on a Weird Weekly News. And I've even had a personal friend who's recorded some of this stuff, and we actually
I did see that too, and that was
video
really cool.
on there. And I think I'll repost that video because she did share that with me. But even back in the 1700s, that one article that I was referring to, they did talk about it being like this bright light in the sky or like a ball. And then, but what's particularly interesting is the fact that we have an ancient culture. So like, I guess the United States, what I have found through multiple places is that they're saying that the US or North America, I shouldn't say United States because that's kind of egotistic. So North America itself is considered like a mysterious land with ancient secrets. That's pretty much what it all boils down to. I feel like there are a lot of mystical things that have happened here, and we take that back to the Native Americans are the people that lived here prior to the Europeans coming over and colonizing the place. So and we're talking about a civilization of people that they almost consider like potentially a lost civilization because they've actually found petroglyphs in in places that predate people that we didn't even realize were around in that time. And some of the petroglyphs that they had were like very interesting, like round circles, almost remind you like of the crop circles that we see today that people talk about and report. Mm-hmm. And then there's also there's just this common thread through the natives that lived in this land, through their storytelling, both verbally and through drawings in the petroglyphs that refer to these star people. And a lot of the stories are very rich in nature with discussion of star people, and that there are these ancient sacred sites throughout North America which would be like the meeting place where these star people would come, and they would help, and they would teach these civilizations different things and talk to them. And they were considered to be the people that are basically like the rulers of this place, like the masterminds, our Gaia, if you will, kind of like, our God. So it's really interesting to read some of those things. Again, we couldn't possibly get into all of those things today, but it led me down the rabbit hole of these sacred ancient sites that they talked about. And I don't know if any of you have heard of ley lines before. Have you ever heard of ley lines? Ley?
Yes,
I've heard it. I've heard it mentioned before. Yes.
Okay, Rob. So you've heard of it as well.
Every fancy, the pyramids and Stonehenge and everything, all those mystical ancient sites lay on the ley lines. Sit on the ley lines. It's like the energy. Right? Like the energy that falls through the earth, like rivers of energy, basically.
Yeah. So they're saying that these sites are built in these particular high energy, high vibration places, and that you can draw perfect lines from one point to the other where they all connect in these what they call ley lines. It's a bit more complicated than that, but Rob did an amazing job of like summarizing it, because I'm serious, you did a really good job, because I was like trying to figure out what the summation should be. And I'm sorry, did you want to say something else about that, Rob?
And it's not like they're just drawing one line from one point to another. It's one line that can go around the world, and there's several sites on it. It's way more complicated and intricate than that. Way I'm saying it.
No, you did a great summation, because the lines literally, they go around the earth. So if you would imagine a flat earth, which the earth is not flat, but if you imagined a flat earth, you could find these lines that are all like crisscross, like straight lines, and then they cross each other, and at each one of these points something magical and mystical goes on. So it's like it's the energy that's created there. And so they're saying that somewhat like these locations then be tied in with UFO sightings. And when I was doing research, it was saying, yes, that the ley lines in and of themselves are like the story or lore behind them is that they are richly like tied into increased UFO sightings in these areas, and or places that they consider a portal where these star people would come. Yes, Rich, sorry.
I think I heard it mentioned on Skinwalker Ranch, I think is where I heard that mentioned before. The ley lines is when you said it. I think that's where I heard it mentioned before after watching the first season or whatever. And I think there's going to be new episodes of that coming out, which I'm interested to see.
I hope so. That's such a good show.
There's a lot of different things going on there that I think we're all going to get into with some of this other stuff we're going to talk about, that you can go both ways on it.
Right.
And I think going back to, like you said, with earlier with the hieroglyphics or whatever. How do you say that?
Petroglyphs and hieroglyphs.
That's it. Yes. If you think about it, back then, what purpose would anybody have to make anything up? So I mean, when you have that and you decipher those, and they're talking about the star people, there's no newspapers, there's no internet. They're not getting these ideas in their head from other people telling them this. So I mean, where did that come from? I mean, it makes you think, if anything, is what exactly was going on back then.
I mean, yeah, because some of these carvings were from 8,000 BC.
Yeah, there's no way they could just make that up.
Right.
You know?
And so it's just interesting. And what I thought was so interesting when they talk about like these ancient sites being like where they saw more sightings and being associated with more sightings is that, you know, the ley lines go through there, which I'd love to do an episode on ley lines because it's such an amazing topic.
I would be interested to see what exactly lies on them.
What else I would like to know is the ley lines at these points that where they're matching up with these sites. How many of these sites have military installations within X amount of mileage from them? That's what I want to know. So that's what I would like to look into when I look at that. Yes, Rob.
So like Area 51. Is that what you're saying? See if that sits on a ley line?
Yes, and or near a ley line where the sightings, or where, you know, these places like Stonehenge. Is there a military installation close by that? Okay, for instance, right now. And so, well, I tried to take a dive into it, and there's just so much into it. But one of the other things that I thought was interesting with regards to these petroglyphs that they found here in North America, I mean, also in hieroglyphs, you can see things in ancient hieroglyphs where they talk about star people as well. But so it's, you know, all across the world. But in 1902, there was a guy named G.E. Kincaid that supposedly he was an explorer. He was an explorer, and supposedly when he was in the Grand Canyon, he found like an ancient city or some caverns. Like he went in this cavern, and when he went in there, it was like thousands of feet. So there's like this main area, and there was thousands of feet of tunnels that went off of this. And supposedly he found ancient carvings and writings on the wall inside of these tunnels in the Grand Canyon. And then when he went in further, supposedly he found like Egyptian style mummification and other things that came from that area and that culture. And supposedly after his trip, obviously they didn't have a telephone. They could just give somebody a call over this. So he made his way to Phoenix, I believe. And then there he went directly to a newspaper and he told them about this stuff. So then an archaeologist from the Smithsonian Institution actually went to the Grand Canyon, I guess, with him to take a look at this place, verified it. And then after that, supposedly these caverns got sealed up, hidden, and this guy, G.E. Kincaid, completely disappeared. And then when the Smithsonian is asked, the Smithsonian said a guy by the name of Jordan, who is an archaeologist, never worked here ever. But yet the Phoenix newspaper back in 1902 reported this in their local newspaper that all this stuff happened.
It's a common theme. People disappearing that were supposedly there or not there. Yeah, that's common.
Rob, you had your hand up first.
So the hand holding up thing is so weird.
You don't have to do it. I just didn't know it was going to be so much. Just interrupt then. I just thought, well, like when people are
because there's so much like I could have said that I didn't want to interrupt. But what I just learned, and maybe I'm the most naive person here, that the Smithsonian is owned by the government. It is a government department. I didn't know that until I've seen some recent videos on certain. What was I actually seen one on giants and something that I didn't know. So that explains a lot. Don't ever bring anything to the Smithsonian. No. I've learned that's bad. Also, was this Kincaid? Did he find Egyptian artifacts also?
Yeah, he said that he felt like that it was from the Egyptian era, and like. I mean, people are trying to say it was a hoax and all this other stuff. But I mean, at some point, our continent was all like, you know, everything was, I don't know, you know, everything was connected, obviously, in the beginning, and then it slowly goes away, and that was before people. But I don't know if it would be that far out of the realm that something could be found there or not, or if the same practices.
Because we find as time goes on, we're starting where we had that point in history that we thought this is when man got upright and used bronze tools, and we were smart enough to create languages and cities and sewage systems and whatnot. Now we're starting to learn that there are cities much older than that.
Mm.
So that they would actually travel, great distances. We're starting to find evidence of trade routes and Vikings and other areas we didn't think people were reaching at that time. And as you were talking about the Native Americans, and they are also the Native Americans are the first that brought up the insect people, the insectoid aliens. And also the interesting thing about that is the common theme amongst a lot of these ancient aliens and origins is that because the Native Americans were first to mention that the aliens claim to have come from the center star on the Orion constellation, on the Orion's belt. And I can't remember the name of the planet, but a lot of the alien stories are supposedly that's where they originated from.
Was it Uranus?
First off, it's pronounced Uranus, and that's not a star.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if you have an OnlyFans account, it is.
Right. A stink star, right? Okay.
There you go.
Brian, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I had a couple of things. One, you could probably edit in for when Rich was talking about the different places around the world all kind of talking about the same thing and they didn't have any way to communicate. I had something like that. But going with the story that you just had with the Smithsonian and somebody going to the Grand Canyon and finding this kind of thing. At first I thought you were going to there was an episode of Expedition Unknown, and it's almost that same story where they go out to the Kalahari Desert because some guy at the turn of the century, 1885, some explorer guy went out into the Kalahari Desert and came back with a diary listing of stuff and some pictures that he took of some fabled lost city of Dwarka, I think is what it was. I'm not sure. And he comes back, and then the whole episode was they were trying to re-follow his footsteps the way that he mapped it out, almost like an Indiana Jones map or something like that. But it was real similar that he claimed he found this city that was so great and all these artifacts that were so ahead of their time, and nobody's ever been able to find it again. But it just made me think of that. But when Rich was talking about all of the, when you talk about places that have the hieroglyphs and petroglyphs, and they weren't talking to each other, the question that I've always wondered when it comes to that, because we see pyramids, everybody seems to have made pyramids.
Yep.
Everybody looks to the sky, and they all have a story of somebody in the sky or somebody that came down. And the first thought always is exactly what Rich said is, well, boy, they weren't talking to each other. It's not like they were running around doing a game of telephone. But the question becomes, is
maybe they're using their mind.
Maybe. Or putting on my skeptic hat. Is the pyramid, like, I would love an architect maybe to get their take on it. Is it just one of those things where it's everybody going through time as human beings, we have certain things that are going to be a standard? Like we say, but they all made pyramids. What are the odds? Like, I would like to know, is a pyramid a very basic shape to make? Architecturally.
Like, is it something that we would have been inclined, that just would have been the discovery of anything and everybody at that time trying to build something?
Right. Like, you have to crawl before you walk, unless you're not going to walk at all because you're the laziest baby in the world. But you say, you know what I mean? Like, before you can start building other structures, you're like a little kid using blocks, and maybe the pyramid is the easiest thing to make. So everybody stumbles upon that through the course of learning how to build.
Right, because the basis of the whole thing is, I mean, it leans up on each other, and now we do domes. And there's no way we use domes, arches in a lot of our construction because it seemed to be the most support. Well, they weren't sure they could have made a brick arch or something, but as far as using metal, it leaned up on each other. I mean, essentially it's the same theory as a teepee.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like there was a set of industry standards at the time, and but so somebody had to talk from somewhere. Either people were able to visit continents long before we ever thought it was possible to get back and forth to these places, so that there was like these shared ideas, or there was somebody visiting each one of these places that could impart this wisdom on it, or like you said, it's just a natural evolutionary thing that everybody would have discovered this was the easiest way to do.
Well, it also, I mean, it's the same thing with God, right? Everybody came up with a God, right?
Yeah.
So I hate to be like that, you know what I mean, and contradict my own beliefs as far as aliens visiting everybody, right? But
no, it brings up the right question of they all saw stuff in the sky. The sun is in the sky, the moon is in the sky, the stars are in the sky. That's one of those other things that you would think as human beings, especially on the uptick of civilization, you look to the sky. I everybody would be influenced by that. I'm not saying that it can't be that aliens came down, because that would be sweet, but you can look at the other side and all of the things that we think that are so complex, or this really big idea that had to be shared. It could just be the natural progression of human beings. These are all the things that we all notice,
Yeah. Like we're just, well, I guess that just was wrote into the programming when they started the Matrix. It's just,
don't talk about it, because anytime we do, I feel like it's going to stop. So
you're gonna like change the coding now. Well, I mean, the cool thing about this thing in 1902 is I'd be really interested to know, because that's a whole nother subject, a whole nother topic that I would also like to cover, because I'd like to know if there was any modern day explorers who've tried to go down there, because supposedly this door was sealed and shut and locked or something.
They still go out there.
And
it's also the area that cave was in is restricted. You can't go in that area anymore. And so even if you wander in that area, and I just saw a video about this, that helicopters will show up, and they have videos of the helicopters flying them around them as they start getting in that area in the Grand Canyon. It's a no-fly zone.
I need to find a drone pilot. We need to send one in there and see what happens to our drone. We'll buy a cheap one off Amazon, so we're not out a lot.
What are they hiding there?
I don't know. I mean, supposedly whatever was in this cave, there was all this. I mean, and it's history that would not make sense. It wouldn't fit what our history books tell us, right? So it defies. And now if you like look this stuff up on this G.E. Kincaid, people are like, oh, it was a hoax. It was this. Again, I did not read enough of it to know, because that's not what the episode was about. So I had to stop myself from doing too much, because I'm like, okay, we're going to have to definitely cover this on another episode, because I would love to do this as a whole topic and talk about this, because I just found it so fascinating. So I'm glad you had some more information on it, Rob, as far as it being no fly zone and stuff, because I literally had to stop myself from reading more, because I'm like, my brain can't take it right now. But so as far as history goes, that's where we're at. We have lots of people, down from like farmers to city folk I mean, just literally all walks of life have reported it. So I'm sure that Rob is going to, in our next little segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the conspiracies, which during this time of all this reporting, the government got involved and they started going through and doing these investigations. Rob may be able to shed a little bit more light. Were they top secret? Were they not? But we have Project Blue Book that was from 1952 to 1969. We had another project. What is it called? Project Sign. Let me see here. Oh yeah, so it's Project Sign, which was done just before Project Blue Book. It kind of all segued into Project Blue Book, and that was in 1947, and then Project Grudge in 1948. So one led into the other, which kind of then opened the door for the other, so that we're talking about three different projects that the military worked on to do research and looking into UFOs at that time. There were so many people that had reported claims of UFOs that they thought it was worth to get involved. And then at some point in I think I posted something on our Facebook page too, because in 1966 there was something called the Ford press release, and this is where Gerald Ford, who at the time was a congressman, and he was the House Republican leader, and he came out with this like statement that he had released, and I posted this on our Facebook page, and it was talking about how like there were so many people that it was in the country's best interest to do research, for us to take a look into it, because we owed it to the American people. And apparently there was an astrophysicist that looked into it that called some of the stuff that people had seen swamp gas. They said that it was swamp gas that people were seeing. And Gerald Ford was like, you know what? No, like that was just like a flippant response. That I think that was like the quote that was used. He wasn't happy with that. He's like, the American people deserve to know. And there was this huge ordeal about it. So, that was a whole nother piece to that puzzle of trying to get the American people answers. Now, what I did, so from that, though, there was another government that had done a top secret investigation on UFOs, and there was a UK version of our Project Blue Book, and it was called Project Condon, and that was from 1997 to 2000, so that was a little bit more recent. And then when we talked about the reports and kind of the United or North America being like a hot spot, especially the United States with all these reports, I asked my friends in Italy, and I said, look, what do you guys talk about UFOs over there? I mean, do you remember growing up? Like, were there stories? Is it something that's talked about now? Does the news talk about it? What's going on in your country with UFOs? And so one of them had mentioned that it's kind of like not really discussed like as a social topic, because it's considered kind of like more of something of fairy tales, but not that people don't believe in the existence, but just the lore of it that's just, not really discussed. But another one of my friends, she said she seems to remember that it used to be talked about a lot, and it was like back in the 70s, but now these days she doesn't really hear much more about it. And she's a physicist. So, what she was saying is that, and so I asked her, I said, so was this like local UFOs, like things like, did you guys talk about UFO sightings in Italy, or were all the talks about UFOs centered around the United States stories? And
Right.
they said they remember it being the United States event.
That's because Italy doesn't have swamps.
That's true. They don't have enough swamp gas. But my friend did mention, I'm going to just look this up really quickly. One story that she did remember, which she didn't have much information about, so I'll look up a little bit more about it. But she said that there was reports in the 70s, maybe around 1970, about a lot of lights flying on the Adriatic Sea. In that time. So I'll have to definitely look that up, because I didn't confirm that, because that was last bit of information I got right before we came on here. So I just thought that was pretty interesting that it's really focused a lot here. I mean, not that we don't see things. There were reports just as in this past year, this year, right? We had like UAPs up the wazoo here in the beginning of 2023, where supposedly
it's all that way. It's all gone. We don't shoot anything sky anymore. We don't do that. There's no other junk up there that is dangerous to aircraft. It was just that one-time thing for a few days. So continue, because that never happened.
Yeah, it never happened. Go on with your life. But then meanwhile, then they were reported in Russia that they supposedly shot down a UFO in Russia. And then we had the other things that we were supposedly shooting down here in the United States.
That's because Russia's trying to one-up us like they do everything else. We're shooting down UFOs. They got to shoot down UFOs.
It's just such a space race, I'll tell you.
Yes, it is.
But and then I'm going to hand this over here to Rob here in just a couple seconds. But some of the most recent stuff we had, like we said, we had some stuff released over the last few years from the government with some reports that were given to us about different investigations that were done. We have some footage of some UFOs or UAPs that we can't, they can't come to any kind of conclusion as to what it is or where it came from, how it interacts, how it flies in the sky. It's reported in lots of different ways. There's some that like they zip across the sky. There's some that just hover. There's a lot. So, I mean, we have so many different reports of different types of things. And to your point with the balls of light in the sky, I mean, could that have been back in the 1700s? Could that have been some kind of like phenomenon in the sky, like, a meteor, or, was any research done to trace back to see would there might have been a meteor shower or meteors at that time? Or a comet. I mean, I remember seeing the Hale-Bopp comet when it came through, but I did not see the UFO in its tail as it came through. But and I didn't drink any crazy Kool-Aid during that time. But and then today, of course, we have Skinwalker Ranch, which not just talks about skinwalkers, but also talks about UFOs. And then we have the Las Vegas UFOs that have made it into the news with most recently in the last few weeks, where supposedly, they on this police officer's body cam, you can see the light coming through the sky. A crash was heard, and supposedly there were these cryptid alien humanoid type creatures in these people's backyards. So I don't know. I think we'll discuss at the end if we think we really exist, but did we cover the history of UFOs and what they are to everybody's satisfaction?
I just want to bring up and segue maybe back a little bit before we move forward, a different direction maybe. What I've noticed too is when you read, you have a lot of like politicians or high-ranking officials that they've seen something, yet all of a sudden they didn't. Oh, they were mistaken. I was wrong. It wasn't that. I think Jimmy Carter, before he was president, I think had said something like he thought he had seen something in the sky. Then he becomes president. No, I was wrong. It couldn't have been that. I was mistaken. Yet then after he's not president anymore, oh yeah, maybe I was. It's like they want to bend. It's like the government wants to bend the reality whenever they want to. And a lot of these stories that we're going to talk about, or we have talked about, usually end in people with coats going through your personal stuff because you said something you weren't supposed to say, which if there's nothing there that anybody should be worried about, what's that all about? What's all the secrecy? What's the point if someone's talking and says something? Shame on you. Now we're going to come to your house. We're going to go through your stuff. What's are they concerned that people are going to cause mass hysteria in the public? I think we're beyond that. Right. True. We are a society of people that, we will believe, a lot of people will believe anything and run with it. I don't know. I like to think that our group here at least has a little bit of common sense of what's real, what's not real, and we're able to talk it out and bring it to the listeners and at least give our opinion on it. I don't know that anybody can sit here and is going to say for sure we believe everything we say, whether it's this topic or anything else. We're giving opinions on it.
Right.
But it's odd that a lot of the stories you hear, or if you go on to other podcasts or you read about, a lot of people have seen something, but all of a sudden they were mistaken. I must have been wrong.
Yeah.
So I noticed a lot of that when I was looking at different articles and listening to other podcasts and stuff like that.
So to your point, Rich, that you have a lot, like, I feel like in very, very recent history, that's starting to change a little bit. And I think the seal was kind of broken when you have, Commander Fravor, who comes out and says, here's what we saw with our eyes. Here's the actual, video from our targeting pod that you can see. Like, all of a sudden you had somebody who is unbelievably credible giving you their take on it, and you can take what they're saying and you can try to pick it apart scientifically to say it's not from another planet, but the information that the person is giving has a lot of weight to it because we can see it and they're explaining it. So once you have somebody in that position who kind of came forward, I feel like that opened the floodgates a bit. Fast forward to today, and you have David Grush, who's the whistleblower on the whole UFO program that's going on. That guy's been in the news the last several weeks.
Yep.
And as of today's recording, in a few days, on July 26th, the House Oversight Committee is having a UFO hearing, a public hearing that you'll be able to watch, that they're going to be going over all of these UFO questions and talking to David Grush about all of his whistleblower claims that he's made. I mean, that's a big thing when you have somebody like David Grush who actually did work in these departments for these various programs, who has filed a whistleblower complaint federally. That's not just something you can do. Once you do that, your information, like, you have to be telling the truth. If you're not, you're going to, I think it may be, I don't know if it's a felony, but no, I think it is a felony. If you do that, you face federal charges because you're abusing that. So there's a little bit of skin in the game when you come forward with an actual whistleblower complaint like that. I think it has to carry some weight with what the person.
You're kind of fucked either way.
When somebody comes through with a report like that, who is going to follow up? Somebody has to follow up to make sure that person, they have to fact check what that person's reporting. Who's going to do that? The government?
Same people that are covering it up.
Right. So whenever we have these big reports that come out from NASA every now and then, they say the same thing. They tell us they're going to reveal this or they're going to tell us about this, and they skip the whole meat and potatoes of what we're looking for. So I would bet that this guy's story is going to change a lot between now and when he does that hearing or whatever it is we're going to see on TV, and that there's not going to be any evidence. He's got to have evidence, and how's he going to produce it, versus the government? And this has happened throughout history, and this is where I'm talking about being bad with names. I just watched the thing about if the moon landing was fake, and there was a gentleman on there, and I'm sure you've seen him in something, where he was caught. He worked for the government, and he was called into a room to help work with fix some cameras, and a guy showed him pictures of moon bases, and he came forward and started telling everybody, then mysteriously got hit by a car. Who's the guy got his fingers shut off in the shootout in Area 51 when they were digging it out? He's been in a lot of stuff. He used to go around. He had a mysterious death. There's a lot of people like that. And then you have the disinformation campaigns that the government puts out, and they go back and forth on that stuff as well. So it's like, even anybody in the military who spoke out at that time we shot those UFOs out, I wonder where they are right now. Like, maybe they've had a mysterious death since then. We don't even know.
It's odd how it all of a sudden just stopped, isn't it, though?
You're right. That's what I mean.
And you heard nothing
about it. If they
want
to put the kibosh on it, they're going to put the kibosh on it above anybody else.
Well, that's why with David Grush, it's so interesting, because this is like the first federal employee who's following some sort of protocol that's already in place with an established law that came out, that the the Oversight Committee members are supposed to be receiving, because of a bill that was signed a few years ago, they're supposed to be receiving anything that comes from the agency where David Grush worked, and that's why he filed the whistleblower complaint, is because they weren't following the law that had been established that Congress has to receive these things, and there were people in the middle who were just making sure the information didn't go that far. So at the end of the day, could that whole thing just be a disinformation thing and we roll him out and it's, keeps our minds off of other stuff? Yes, that's super cynical. I don't want to believe I'm that cynical yet. I think that there's at least a little bit of meat on the bones to hear questions that, congressmen and congresswomen there are some people who are there who will ask questions who A, don't know any better, or B, don't care. There's some people that have a little bit more of a rebellious edge to them when it comes to certain things, which I'll be interested to see how much of a leash they let themselves go out on during that hearing.
What they need to do is put him in front of a committee of his peers other UFO enthusiasts or people that are in the community and have them ask him questions and see how many of the answers he can answer and see how many of the answers are similar to what everybody else puts out there and no proof to back any of it up.
Oh, they're already being debriefed, I'm sure. And there's already going to be a bunch of stories about swamp gas. Nothing ever gets released.
Yeah, I mean, supposedly we get some things released, but I don't know. Like, it's hard to believe in the validity of it whenever things are shrouded in such secrecy, and whenever you do things like whether it's conspiracy or not, the facts still remain that these types of things do happen. You have people that come out and say something and then they end up missing. This G.E. Kincaid back in 1902. Whether or not, I'm not saying he was right or wrong. I don't know enough about the situation, but just knowing that there's, things out there that supposedly he disappeared. Now, again,
right, I could just there you go. You got the government involved because you have the Smithsonian involved.
Right. And now I don't know. I never checked the validity of did he disappear? Did he die a natural death? And this was just all lore. So I urge listeners just to take what I said about G. Kincaid for face value of this is just what I read, and I did not, really dive into it. And at some point I would love to dive into his story so that we could do an episode on it. Because it is really interesting to me to the point that it's funny you bring that up, Rich, because as I'm doing some of this research and when I was Googling a couple things, I was like, wow, I wonder, I'm Googling like correspondence of ley lines next to military installations. Like, did I just type in keywords that are going to, that put me on some kind of watch list? Or is my brain allowing myself to just go too far down this, conspiracy rabbit hole? To think that anything that Gina in, the Midwest, whatever she Googles on her phone is important to national security, which I don't think is the case. But it does make you think about, anything I type in my phone. It does make me think, because I shit you not, I was talking to somebody about like my mom has to have a certain procedure done. And I was like, oh, it'd be kind of cool to get, an ultrasound on your neck to find out, what the shape your carotid arteries are in, if there's like plaque buildup in it or whatever. And I then see something on my phone on Facebook for this company that does this. You can like pay to just have it done on your own. It's like preventative therapy or a preventative testing that you can do on your own, pay out of pocket and have it done, and it's read by a real radiologist. And then, I'm not joking, the same day that I saw it on my phone, I came home and there was a letter, an advertisement letter in the mail from these people in my mailbox. And what I'm thinking is I probably talked about it a couple weeks ago, and then my information probably got sold. And so now they're going to inundate me in every way possible by my social media and now by mailing things to my house. And that's just straight up spooky to me. That is just like, so I believe that there is a lot of validity, and or I can understand why there's so many conspiracies the way that it is. I mean, you have things like the Project Blue Book that came out finally, that people found out about. And that was just a code name for a study into UFOs by the United States military. It started in 52, went through 69. And like I said, Project Sign was something very similar. Where it was also doing another study by the U.S. Air Force on UFOs at that time, but it was called Project Saucer initially. So what they had seen there was the saucer. So, I mean, there's all kinds of these like documents that were obviously released in this Freedom of Information Act, and you can take a look at some of them, but then you wonder like, okay, what haven't we seen? Because like Project Sign got unclassified, and you can see all of the things that went into
the Blue Book got unclassified. It's believed that it still went on much longer than 69.
Oh, probably.
And whenever you get any of that Information Act, whatever it's called, is so much of it is crossed out. Sometimes there's entire pages missing. So they're still only going to give you, even though we have that Information Act, they're still going to only give you what they want to give you.
Right.
And you can't fight it. You're not going to be able to ever fight it.
Well,
this is why I thought I had time and I need to write stuff down, because I cannot remember names of anything or anyone to have any validity to what I'm saying.
You're not the only one.
You know
Rob,
that
I'm
one
right
guy? That one guy that got his hand shut off? He was. I cannot remember. I'm trying to
that's
look.
Okay. Hey,
I'm trying to look
okay.
up his name, and I can't even find it.
Look, I think the bottom line is I think we can all agree there's something going on.
Right.
There's too many sightings. There's too many stories that go back as far as we can think. You know, sightings go back as far as 1495 BC or something. So I mean, there's something going on. Are we ever going to find out what it really is? I don't know, because I think everybody has their own opinion, and there's too much disinformation that's going around that wrecks the information that is correct. You don't know what to believe is the unfortunate part. There could be a guy that's telling the truth and is 100% has seen something and he's onto something, but nobody's going to believe him because of the 10 other people that are full of shit. And that's what everybody wants. That's what everybody falls into, because there's so many parallels with everybody's story that you go, well, we've heard this before. And that, I think that's unfortunately what we're going to end up with no matter where we go with this. You're never going to find it out unless somebody brings out an alien and a ship and proves it to you, which nobody has. And it's never going to happen.
Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yeah. And I want to point something out, by the way. I was listening to something that they said, if you look at that head on those, that's not what you're seeing. What they're saying is, someone had brought up here, I don't know who it was, I think it was Rob, about the insects. If you think about a praying mantis, when you look at the head on, that's what it looks like. So it's not that head is shaped like that. It's just that you're looking at it.
You're looking at the top portion of the head. You're looking at it,
looking straight head on. That's how the head looks.
From the side, yeah.
Now if you looked at it at a different angle, you could see that the head is like aiming down. Someone had brought that up, and when they said that, I thought that was interesting. That's not really what you're seeing, which probably falls into a lot of the categories of a lot of the things we're hearing about. It's not what it seems.
Well, before I hand it over to Brian, I just wanted to bring this map to light. So those of you listening, you can take a look at YouTube, or you can look at in the show notes. I'll have a link to this. This is a UFO sightings map. And this is a map just of the United States. And it says that historic UFO sightings are symbolized in yellow. And then there's over 80,000 recorded UFO sightings over the past century, and they did it from data between 1910 and 2014. So when you click on these locations, it'll give you information about the sighting. Like, for instance, a craft and its probe motionless over a nuclear depot 1 hour at Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So if you click on each one of these points, it'll tell you like the details. Go
over the Milwaukee one. See what the Milwaukee ones say.
Let's see here. A fireball, 2 fireballs flying in tandem. Let's see here. This was 1 of 6. Multicolored lights, random fast moving, hovering and blinking. Strange lights, stranger shapes, and a strange ending. So I'm sure you could like click on these stories. Very large, bright moving searchlight, but no plane or helicopter in sight to be making it. And then a ball of light floating in the sky near Main Freeway in Milwaukee. And as you can see, Chicago's a hot spot. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Norfolk, and Miami.
Well, Florida's not a surprise. Everything weird happens in Florida. So.
What surprises me is St. Louis is a hot spot.
A lot of Midwest and East.
Yeah.
which strikes me as strange because that's the more populated areas. It seems like as you go west, you got a lot more desert area, mountainous areas, and
where you
it
think
almost
you'd
follows
see more.
that. Yeah, it almost follows that a little bit, which is strange. You would think if you're not trying to be detected, and maybe that's what the map's telling us. Maybe that's where we need to look.
Well, that's where all Area 51 and the other airport out there, military base that's close to Area 51, they're out in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody in the Midwest is drunk, so they're seeing all kinds of stuff.
There's 27 sightings around the Las Vegas area, but it doesn't say anything about Area 51. Like, it doesn't specify Area 51 that I could find.
Does it say anything about
more sightings of that in Las Vegas.
The Battle of LA or the Battle over LA?
Yep.
Well,
was that on that map?
Let me see here. There's 44. There's triangle V-shaped craft observed low altitude. It looks like so far strange lights, but there's 44 of them. One said rectangular slinky, which had the appearance of being made of a flat black ribbon dangling from clouds for 10 miles, and it was not smoke, they said. So,
it was a tentacle.
So, yeah, probably. But, so, I mean, I thought that map was really interesting, so I'll definitely put a link for people to take a look at it, because it was pretty cool.
That's cool.
But Brian has a lot of knowledge, a lot of research, because he's been very vested in Bob Lazar as he relates to ufology. And so Brian's going to take over at this point and tell us a little bit more of who this guy is and how he became, kind of like the, what's that word? The aficionado on ufology.